Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Pause for the Truth. I am Jocelyn Turner. So nice to be with you all this evening. And of course, joining me as co host is Dr. Rogers Cain. Dr. Cain, how are you this evening?
I'm doing great, JT. I'm happy to be not on a subway today, so excuse the pun. But I'm happy that I'm here in Jacksonville, where for right now is relatively safe.
Yeah, when you wake up every day and you look at the news, or when you go to work and you come home, hadn't heard the news all day, I tell you what, Dr. Kane, you are liable to hear all sorts of things that have happened across not only our city and country, but in the world in terms of, what's going on out there. So tonight's discussion, of course, we decided that we're going to do what we call an open mic, but it's really just an open conversation. We talk about pause for the truth, where we can tell you what's really going on. Well, of course, we certainly don't have all the answers, but we are fortunate to have some viewers who tune in every week and share their thoughts and say, why don't you talk about X, Y, and Z? So tonight, we're just going to have a conversation amongst ourselves, and we invite our viewers to, of course, as always, post your comments and anything you would like for us to chat about. Please also post that in the chat. And is our behind the scenes guy joining us tonight, Dr. Kane, called Tyrone?
I think Tyrone should be one of those people that go ahead and open his mic up.
So no one ever sees who we have this person, and it sounds like a fictitious person called
Right.
Tyrone.net, but he actually exists, and we are so fortunate to have his expertise behind the scene, and I think he kind of prefers it. But if he wants to join us tonight, the our viewers won't just have to listen to you and I, but let's go ahead and join Dr. Kane. I want to talk about something that somebody texted me a couple hours ago and said and asked, is there a new variant out there? They said that they heard that some country is in India is shutting down again. Had you heard about that?
Okay, so I don't. I know the most recent variant that everybody know about is the BA2. And I do recall vaguely hearing something along that line, but I can't tell you exactly. I did put Dr. Kim Barbara Johnson on notice that we were open mic, so I think she's traveling in the car, but she may get if she hears me, she will text me and give me a little bit more detail. But here, let me say this about variance. I think that's the most important thing is here's where our problem lies. I think we have begun to open up. Well, let me backtrack. Because you talked about India is beginning to, it didn't necessarily say shut down, but there are places throughout the world and throughout this country that are beginning to look at mandating masks, particularly in public places again. And as many of our viewers thought, we thought that everything would be over with because it gives the appearance that we're now post-COVID. And on this show, we warned patients, we warned viewers that we uh, have to redefine post-COVID because we're not post-COVID. I've said from the beginning that this virus is just like you and I trying to survive. And it does what it needs to survive. And one of the mechanisms by which it can survive is to mutate. And the more exposure it gets to things that can kill it, the more it will mutate to try to keep from being killed. And so I think we've gotten anywhere from 40 to 50 variants on this virus at this point. It's quite a few.
We just don't hear about it. We only hear about the ones that are so widespread or either causing a lot of sickness or death.
Right, the most dominant ones.
Right.
And what we're seeing, and what we've been warning people about, most of the validated uh, 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 advisors like the CDC and people of that nature, they've been warning us, look, this is not over. And what we need to make sure we understand is that we're giving the vaccine when we first brought it out was really did a great job at preventing contraction of the virus. Of course, we were so slow, and that for whatever reasons, we didn't. Not of all of us got the vaccine. We know what the reasons are without getting into too much of that. Not all of us got the vaccine, but that opened the door for the virus to mutate and get a chance to adjust to what we were trying to kill it off with or prevent its maintaining its presence in society. Long story short, we've now went through a couple of aggressive, whether or not it's aggressive in terms of causing illness or aggressive in terms of virulence, meaning aggressive in terms of it infecting people. We went through several variants that have pretty much kind of, at one time, it brought us to our knees, so to speak. And so even though the initial vaccine was preventing the virus from being transferred from one individual to the next, these vaccines have now become where that prevention is no longer the sought after, and I may need to rephrase that. It's no longer the sought after effect we're looking for vaccine and boosters. We're talking about a fourth booster now. We did a third booster. Now we're talking about a fourth booster. Before you know
No,
it,
it's just the second booster. You mean the fourth shot?
I mean fourth shot and second booster. You're absolutely correct. And before you know it, it may start looking as if we're going to be looking at a booster every
Annual.
4 to 5 months. No, not just annual, because this virus seems to be mutating pretty quickly, and look like about every 6 months we're looking at a different virus, right? A different variant.
Brilliant. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so I think the goal is shifted now from preventing the infection to preventing illness that is, a very damaging illness. We can get sick, but it won't kill us. It won't put us in the emergency room. It won't, we can survive the virus. But now the next question might be, so what does that mean, surviving the virus?
And on that note, Dr. Cain, I'd like to ask Tyrone a question. And Tyrone, I'm putting you on the spot for a reason, and you'll know why. I know, Tyrone, I'm, you don't have to reveal where you go to church, but I know you're active in your church. How do you think? How do you think churches, for example, or religious institutions? A lot of people were told a year ago to limit going to church. A lot of churches were closed, and about a year ago a lot of them start reopening. But now some people are still hesitant about going back to church. Are they hesitant, or do you think that people have gotten comfortable with worshiping virtually?
I think it's a combination of all of the above. Churches, the one thing that's a great challenge with most churches is that it has two major facets. One facet is the economics and the business aspect. The other one is the faith and the belief. And there are large groups who believe strongly in one or the other. Whereas for a church to survive, both have to exist. And what is happening is there are some concerns that as individuals don't come into the building, their donations will dwindle. And so when you have that happen, then you have an opportunity for the churches to suffer. So the churches, as I see it, are torn between what's the best way forward. The truth is the church is made up of individuals, and individuals will have their own opinion. as to what is safe for them. And what is safe, what I may consider safe, will not be what another person considers safe. And the church is forced to manage that entire aspect.
I like
Well,
what you said,
Miss Turner,
Tyrone.
you,
Oh, wait a
you
minute.
you put Tyrone on the spot. I'm gonna put you on the spot because I know you're like Tyrone. You're very participatory in your church. So, what are you feel? How are you feeling about returning to church? Since we talking about COVID,
Guilty,
guilty?
guilty. You know what
Mean
that means?
no.
That means that I too got comfortable with fixing a nice brunch and sitting in front of my television and enjoying the service online, quite frankly. But I have been going back uh, more frequently lately because I enjoy the fellowship, right? Being around other people. I figured that, as you both know, and I know Tyrone, you and I just met, but as you know, Dr. Cain, I retired 3 years ago and I went back to work as a result of COVID. Who does that, right? But because of my public health background, I just couldn't sit back and just watch the world go as it was going without giving my whatever expertise I could bring to the table. And as you can tell, my gift for gab and educating people, helping to dispel myths and talk to people about COVID. Well, since I've gone back to work, I'm like, duh, if I can go back into the office, I certainly can go back into the church, right? And so, but it's not a matter of not choosing to go to church because I'm afraid. It's not going back into church because I am now comfortable and like the option of being able to worship online.
Well,
And
that brings the duality to the issues of somewhat of a duality, the issues about going back to church. Because you use the word being afraid,
mhm,
and then Tyrone used the word of more or less the finances of the church. Okay. And then you also mentioned about the, not camaraderie, but the fellowship
mhm.
aspect of it. So, my question to probably to both of you guys is, does that mean we may be looking at a new phase in terms of religion and how we worship? Is there a hybrid model that may occur? How do you guys view that?
Tyrone, if I might, let me answer first. And the reason I'd like to answer first is because I'm reminded that companies have even pivoted to that direction. They have told some employees that you can come in or you can work from home. And some companies have even said permanently working from home, right? So I think the thing that we need to get from this pandemic, if we didn't get anything, is life is never going to go back to the way it used to be. And I think we have to decide what parts of life, the way it used to be, do we need to morph into something else, or do we need to mix the past with the new? And that's just how I feel. And I think that people want options.
I think the pandemic has showed, especially in religion, that options are good. I think one of the things that has really been important to note with the emergence of the pandemic is an increased participation with younger individuals. See, and when you look at the dynamics of a church, there's always been a division of what I say three separate people, and that is the mothers and seniors of the church, the folks in the middle, and then the young folks. Well, if you look at the statistics and the details, young folks have been leaving the church for quite a while. The pandemic has driven them back to church. It's given them an opportunity to watch church and view and get the message on their own terms. Now, for individuals who've seen God work in their life and are followers of Jesus Christ, they're going to find a way to serve and to get the word, whether it's online the day I don't feel like going in, or whether or not it's I go in. Our lives have been built on that worship. So we're going to find, like you heard Miss Johnson say, she felt guilty. She's in a group that understands through life trials and tribulation the value of putting God first in her life. And we have diverted a generation who didn't get to do that because they value quick and easy and available information. And the pandemic has allowed them to embrace religion again.
Well, I think one of the things that you said very astutely, Tyrone, is that this new generation is one in which technology plays a major role in terms of how they're dealing with life and their lifestyle. And you and I, we I'm the oldest in the crew, obviously. Um, you can look at the gray and tail, and as well as the rest of us, and probably the youngest in the crew, who looked the youngest anyway, is the lady. And Tyrone, that's not you because you're not a lady. Anyway, what we do, what we see is the technology as it relates to these younger folks, and them being able to utilize technology for some of everything. This thing I got right here is the Britannica Encyclopedia times 24,000.
It's
You
our
know,
lifeline too. I mean, you know what I mean?
that's what I mean. Plus
Mhm.
this, plus that, plus this, and obviously our younger generation they really fall into utilizing that immensely. One reason I'm mentioning this is because now I got to go to the other end, being the work that I do, having gotten old and my patients gotten old with me. A lot of my patients are 65 and older, and I mean 65 and older, and they're not going back. They're not in a hurry to get back to church because they are afraid, because the pandemic really affect them and look like it. You know, some of them say it's killing us. I've heard some people say it's killing us, meaning the elderly population.
Mhm.
So they're really afraid to go back, and they were really driving. They were the sisters, the what's the word I'm looking for? They were the seniors in church, and they helped keep things together.
Mhm.
And so a lot of them are afraid to go back. And I don't know what message to give them other than one that is of a medicinal concern, because that's what I'm all about, from the science of it, because that is it. So when they ask me, is it safe to go back? I have to give them honest answer from a medical standpoint. And it's not contradictory to what either one of you guys said, but it is one where I have to talk to them from a hybrid standpoint. So that's why I asked that question.
Well, there are things that I find very interesting whenever individuals talk about the youth of today and technology. And we look at a lot of data and information. And some of the things that are surprising most to me is that the age group of 30 and under use their technology 80 times more than 35 and above.
Mhm.
Okay. But 50 and above use their technology for productivity 120 times more than all of the others. So when you start talking about the youth of today and using technology, they use it for pleasure, enjoyment, and for their own personal needs.
So
They,
entertain.
for entertainment. They are less prolific with regards to productivity than older Americans. See, you and I, we want to do our work. We want to get in and get out. So
Mhm.
whatever I need to do to be able to get my job done is what I put my energy and time in. I spend less time with fun and entertainment than that generation. So it is a perfect storm for technology and at this point we're talking about religion, but for technology and disseminating information to the younger generation that can help them change. If you want young folks to get involved in civic involvement, then we should have an arena where we can disseminate the information to them in a manner that they're able to receive it. If you want to get the generation of today involved in voting or helping the elderly, all of those things, we have failed to create avenues to communicate that to them in a message that they're ready to receive. And churches.
I'm sorry, Tyrone, did I cut you off? Because you just prompted another thought.
Well, go ahead.
So I'm switching gears a little bit, but it's based on what you were just talking about in terms of engaging younger people. So you may have heard the story about the gentleman on Fox News who made the comment about Jacksonville is nothing need to change. There's nothing going on. And then I also heard the story a couple of weeks of a young man talking about the people who go in parking lots at night and do spin it wheelies. And he made a comment, it's nothing for younger people to do in Jacksonville. So there's so much time for them to figure out some fun stuff to do, right? And so, I mean, what do you think? What do you guys think that needs to happen? If any of our city leaders are listening, what do you think that they need to do to find out what does Jacksonville need? And I'm going to say it because I'm not going to let it linger as the elephant in the room, other than the Jaguars, because that was the first thing that came out of that I've heard some local politicians say, well, we are working with Shad Khan, and I have nothing against the Jaguars. I'm a football fan. We're working with Shad Khan in a development around downtown. However, there are some people who don't like football. There are some people who don't even want to go down there with the crowd of being around that. But that's a limited time of year. That's 4 months out of the year. What about the rest of the time of the year? Why do we have to travel to Orlando to go to theme parks? Or why do we have to, fly to other places out of the country or whether for entertainment? So what do you all think about that?
Let me throw it out first. And I got to go retro on you somewhat. Years ago, back in my younger days, when I first, when I was in Jacksonville, once I left the residency, and during residency, there was always a discussion of what are you going to do after residency. And one of the things that most people said that most of these young doctors, which I was at that time, one of the young doctors said at that time is, I don't know, but I'm getting the hell out of Jacksonville. Okay. And that was because there was nothing to do, is what we felt. Fast forward to 94, 95, I did Leadership Jacksonville, and some of the biggest topic that we had in Leadership Jacksonville, as you know, aware, people may be aware, Leadership Jacksonville is a group of young leaders trying to get together. Sometimes they're a little bit older, but trying to get together and help come up with ideas on planning the development of Jacksonville. One of the big things we had at that time was the lack of development in terms of downtown Jacksonville. Fast forward again another 10, 15 years, and even to then also you start looking at, if you recall, we had the, what was that called downtown that we imploded?
Landing, Jacksonville Landing.
The Landing. The Landing was looked at as a save all, and that wound up being imploded and gotten rid of, and so on and so on. Then you fast forward another 10, 15 years and to the point where we're at right now. And when I talk to my kids, which actually I talked to them a little earlier when they were much younger, when they graduated college, most of them said they did not want to come back to Jacksonville because there's nothing to do here. And so these young kids, it's still the same scenario. They feel there's nothing to do here. And they feel that we need to go to Orlando to get something, to do something, to find something. They feel we need to go to Atlanta to get something, to do something. The older folks like us, we want to get a weekend away in Savannah or weekend away somewhere else because where are the jazz clubs? Where are the night venues that is amenable to the older crowd? Where are the night venues amenable to the younger crowd? And for them to, as you say, just to be talking about the Jaguars, if you recall, most people will, I had an issue a while back with and this is, I just got to see it. Some of our city council members, they kept talking about Lot J, and the development of Lot J, but the importance of that time was more about COVID and so on. Even though I understood the need for development for downtown development, it was just more priorities at that time. So now, if we take for granted that COVID is under wraps, now stuff like Lot J and the downtown venue in terms of nightlife does become a priority for some of the city officials. Once the health of the city is kind of, I don't want to say got in check, but it's better off than what it was at the peak of the pandemic. So I just wanted to throw that out and say, I think it is important about downtown development. Even back then, as far back as 1995, and even probably before then, downtown development or development of nightlife stuff in Jacksonville, and everybody was putting it downtown, was a priority. And if you fast forward to today, don't look like we're any further than we were back then. Be honest with you. Other than we got a Coliseum and we got the Jaguars.
Yeah, and somebody just put in a comment that we need some type of civic center or something downtown with some themed restaurants and what have you. And you're right. I mean, and we wonder why. I know them. And Tyrone, I'll give you a chance to chime in, but I know now that the I don't know if it's the mayor's office or city council has a safety and crime reduction commission and looking at opportunities to reduce crime. Well, again, when people don't have anything to do, and for the professionals who may want to go out, like you say, on an evening date and listen to some music and live music and dinner, like they have supper clubs or jazz nightclubs in Las Vegas or New York, places like that. Anywhere else, even when I went to Charleston, there were places like that you can go to. We just don't have those places in Jacksonville. Tyrone, what do you think? What are your thoughts?
I think it's easy to because we live in Jacksonville. I think it's easy to pick at Jacksonville, but I've had the opportunity to speak to individuals all over, and this is a common conversation, and it's even more common the younger the age go. There are very few cities who have ever taken the time to consider activities for its youth beyond what has already been done. You have your group of youth that are involved in sports, and you have AAU, and then you have summer sports, and that's it. One of you said it earlier that not all kids or not all people like sports. Not all of them watch football. So what do you leave for that? Well, here's what evidence has shown us. If you don't create an activity or a venue for them, they create their own. I was driving down on the north side at between Sutel and New Kings Road on Sunday, and I was surprised at the number of individuals, cars, and people out socializing. And if I'm being generous, I would say it was hundreds, it more likely thousands. So without a venue, without a planned activity, they created their own. And this is what happens from city to city, state to state. When you talk about creating activities in a city, you talk about a age group that always rules out another age group. When you say jazz club, that puts you 50, some 40s and above. You say taking a person out to dinner, you create a whole new category. If Jacksonville wanted to be progressive, they would craft a plan that included all of its citizens. So, what would happen if you had a venue for social media display in the downtown where the land was? Where the youth could come and put on TikTok shows, social media shows where it was just specifically designed for that. There would be an opportunity to have them express themselves. It'd be an opportunity for others to impart information to them about decorum and responsibility. Okay, and then from there, you also have a place where you can have live shows and things where you have another group of citizens that will go. A city as a whole is made up of a diverse age group. And until we get to the point where we address all age groups, we always leave a group out. And whichever the younger the group you leave out, the more they create their own.
Well, you morphed into another subject matter. It still ties into this, but you mentioned Sutel, you mentioned citizens and what they think may want to have, and you mentioned a diversity of citizenship, especially as it relates to ages. We're not even talking race and so on. That's a whole nother that's a whole nother discussion matter. But you morphed into a discussion because on Sutel, the city council passed where they were taking the Sutel and changing it from a 4-lane to 2-lane, and they were making sure they put median strips in terms of down Sutel, and their explanation somewhat, and I could have it a little bit wrong, but I'm not too far off. The explanation was that it can help beautify that area. And a lot of people that we talked with felt it was an effort to help curb some of the stuff you just talked about in terms of people aggregating. The other part was that road from from Lim Turner to New Kings Road was a direct route from Lim Turner to Sutel Road. Very busy. And to narrow it down to 2 lanes, one way, one the other, from a 4-lane would be very prohibitive toward growth in that community. Of course, what we heard from City Council was that the citizens recommended that that's what they do. The citizens, in turn, came back and were talking like, well, wait a minute. You didn't ask our input for that community. JT, you may remember the name of what that community committees are, action committees, but that's where they, yes, CPAC.
Citizens Planning Advisory Committee.
Yes. They never really took it, and it's mandated by the city, and the Urban League can really talk about this even better.
Neighborhood Bill of Rights.
Yeah, Neighborhood Bill of Rights, and they really have been really after discussing this. And I think it's been on a low-level discussion because it's a concern for certain groups of citizens, especially as it relates to our Black community. That's why I say you open up a whole nother can of worms when you did that. And their whole thing, as far as the CPAC committee, is the city is obligated to the legal. It was back in the whole Citizens Bill of Rights. I don't have that right in front of me, but that was an issue that the Urban League is saying we're not honoring what the city council voted on at whatever term period that it was. And so because of that, the citizens are not getting accurate input. Now it's up to our city council to reach out and discuss with the people that they represent, as far as CPACs are concerned, to bring it to their attention, which then brings up a whole nother subject matter. And I'm going to shut up real quick to see what you guys got to say. Which then bring a whole nother subject matter is I'm for one that says let's be thoughtful with who you elect to represent you. Let's be more involved in terms of the election process, because if these people are not representing your interests, then why keep re-electing them to office? Not naming names, not calling out individuals, but the bottom line is it all as they what they used to say, all elections are local, or all politics are local. And we tend to not pay attention, as much attention as we should, to local politics. And that has gotten us in a whole lot of trouble as if you're a liberal, especially in those liberal minds. That has gotten us in a whole lot of trouble because the people that don't represent liberal views are the ones who are being more consolidated in their approach to elections, and those who are more liberal seem to be somewhat disjointed. So I throw that into the circle of discussion and see
I
what
don't
you
want to talk about that, Dr. Kane, because I want to back up a second and talk about something else. It kind of relates to a couple of things. Number one, when you talk about an area like Sutel Drive, you talk about an area like Dunn Avenue, they are just thoroughfares to go through communities, right? Neither one of them are what you call a walkable community, right? There are not things around. For instance, in those communities that I reference, you have to drive to everything. It doesn't encourage you to take a walk to the store, take a walk to a restaurant and have dinner with your family, like a San Marco or a St. John's Avenue, right? And so, really, that's the whole thing. When you talk about, we don't have planned communities in the urban core or northwest side of Jacksonville, right? Or even north. And so when people are constantly building these places, I look at all these subdivisions that are coming up, and they are not even including playgrounds on the property, right? So what are kids, teenagers, young adults going to do? They're going to roam into other neighborhoods that might have it. Why not in development include a playground or something within the property? Why not include planned communities? The benefit of making, and I was hoping that you said, Dr. Kane, and I don't know the full history. I thought you were going to say they cut Sutel Road down to wanting to cut it down from 4 lane to 2 because they were making bike lanes, right? Encouraging people to take a bike ride because you're telling them as a primary care doctor, you need to get out and exercise more. You need to become more active. So that's the thing I think that's missing. If people don't understand what walkable or healthy communities are, planned communities, do your homework. So when Dr. Kane mentioned about, as you are choosing who to be your next city leader, ask them the questions. When are you going to invest in the older communities and build? We boast of having the largest park system in the nation. Well, yeah, but what do you do to them? What is it other than
where are the parks located? Where are the parks located?
They're all over Jacksonville, but what is at the park for me to participate in, to choose to participate in if I go? So I think, what Tyrone said was just so key. Why not have what the city used to have, the study circles with the Human Rights Commission? I think what we could use are study circles to learn more about what do citizens of today want. We just, most of us have lived through the pandemic so far. What is it that we'd like to see different as far as growth in our city? Don't just tell me I need to go down to downtown and round the Jaguar Stadium and continually pumping millions and millions of dollars there when I come to my community and there's no entertainment where I live. You know what I mean? And so I think that's the thing that and we've had some comments. Tyrone, what were some of the comments that were
Wait a
posted?
minute. Before you go there, ironically, you did back into what I just said. And that is, you did not get citizens' input, okay, with
Right.
what they would like to have. You do need to be aware of the people whom you elect because they choose not to elicit or solicit your input, okay, and give you an opportunity to voice what needs to be said. If you're not listening to the community, you actually back right into what I was saying,
Well,
that
that's what
we
it
have
was
a
kind of a mixture. And by the way, the comment is we also have to do more to engage youth and create youth leaders. They have wonderful ideas, even though they may not have money, but they can be connected to organizations.
And
exactly.
I, and I want to take a moment and go from there. And this is where our greatest opportunity is, and yet most cities miss out on it. As I spoke earlier, I talked about us missing the boat with regard to reaching out to the youth in a method that they can receive. But we also miss out on arming them with information. When I have had an opportunity to look back on history, and especially with regards to the Black struggle, the greatest leaps with regards to the Black struggle have always been on the backs of children.
Mm.
And it is, you don't want to look at it that way. But when you look at boycotts in Alabama, and you look at the civil rights movement, you look at it, the change that happened in the bombing of the church in Alabama because of the children. Um, when you arm the children or you arm youth, they become that squeaky wheel. The squeaky wheel gets the oil. They have the passion, the time, and all they need is the motivation to move forward. Dr. Kane, I think you said that we need to be engaging and engage the politics, and we need to. They didn't ask us; they just kind of told us what they were going to do. Well, if we had a method to communicate to the youth that they did that, they would not stand for that. One of the things I find very interesting is the altruism of the youth. They all want to save the world. They don't know how. They're still living with their moms and their dads, but they have a very key understanding of what is right. And if we find a way to engage them and let them be the mouthpiece, then we have a greater opportunity to move forth powerful agendas for any specific community.
Well, you actually going back to some of the previous broadcasts that we had when we started talking about the youth and listening to them instead of dictating to them what it was that they needed to do.
Mhm.
If you guys recall that
Mhm.
episode, one of the things that us old folks, as they say, we want to tell them what we should do, or what we should not do, or what they should do, what they should not do. And civil rights in the past, you're absolutely correct, uh, Tyrone. Back then, I agree. The more aggressive, willing, risky um, uh, uh, segment of our population were those youth. They were willing to go out there and take the chance of harm and anything else that came along. However, they were able to do that because of what their parents and their forefathers endured to get them to that point. And it's still the same thing right now. That because of what we've endured, even though I didn't endure as much as my mom did, and she didn't endure as much as her mom did. What we've done is to put it to where our youth can move forward because they are the future. So they can really start looking at what's best for them. What we have to do is allow them to speak and to give them the platform by which to speak and to help educate them, to remind them of what we endured and what our parents endured, so that history does not repeat itself. Be reminded of history, but not
Well,
repeat.
Dr. Kane, you just said something that prompted a thought. We have this new act here in Florida, more than one, but the one that you said in terms of history, where there are things now that teachers are not going to be able to talk about. There are
Exactly.
things now, so when we talk about, and because we don't want to hurt anybody's feeling, but it's our past, it's our history. And despite what people think, history allows us to know what we don't want to repeat. And generally, we learn and we grow from our history. So to not be allowed or be able to talk about it, that's enough. That does something. But I gotta switch gears real quick before we end the time, because the governor of Florida put a House bill yesterday, or whatever bill, state bill, that he's channeling money to enhance responsible fathers here in the state of Florida,
What does
because
that mean?
fathers are missing from so many families. And so he is now, and I don't know what all the bill says, but he is actually dedicated millions and millions of dollars to towards responsible fatherhood here in Florida. What are your thoughts initially about, do you think that there are a lot of households, and what he said was there are a lot of households that don't have fathers who are active in their children's lives, and I know that's not you, but what do you think about that?
Well, first of all,
Not
uh,
knowing what the bill is saying, but just the fact that
yeah,
somebody's saying,
yeah. First of all, be quite frank with you. My opinion may be somewhat biased because I feel, and I'm about to go way deep in the woods, as the signified monkey said. They way down in the jungle deep. Um, the our governor and the legislature have demonstrated very racist activities that have occurred during their legislative movements. And I'm gonna backtrack just a tad, is with what you said. To say that we're gonna hurt somebody's feeling, that's a cop out. You don't want to be reminded of how this nation was built. It was built on the backs of African Americans, period. In the story, I don't care what they got to say about the rest of it. And they don't want to be reminded of that because they, for whatever reason, and I got a whole bunch of reasons I suspect that they're doing it. And a lot of people, other people have these reasons, but sometimes they don't want to say, but I don't have a problem saying it public. However, for, and then even the thought that, fathers, and it's been, you guys know it as well as I do. I stand corrected. I don't care. I mean, you can difference with my opinion. Let me put it that way. When they start talking about responsible fathers or irresponsible fathers in this sense, when they start talking about irresponsible fathers, that sure has a tinge of blackness to it. That sure has a colorism to it, based on past discussions that I've heard very racist motivated conversation. I will agree that kids need to be taken care of, that fathers, we have a responsibilities, and that they should be held liable with their responsibilities. But by the same token, if you're sitting back and putting many of those same fathers in prison for whatever reason, particularly when we start looking at that, a lot of them being in prison are unjustified. Because you can't talk about this without opening up a full can of worms. When you start looking at that, you're going to have a whole lot of kids that are fatherless, or fathers not being, can't say fatherless, but fathers are not included in the picture, not through any actions of their own. It is through actions of the state. And then you do have those deadbeat dads that we need to address, black, white, blue, green, or yellow. I don't care. You need to address them and hold them accountable for being responsible for their kids. And so I agree with that from that aspect, but let's look at the whole picture and
So
not
what
just
it says, Dr. Kane, what he said is, one second, Tyrone. There are more than 18 million children in our country who live without a father in their home. This has a severe impact on children and often leads to dropping out of school, crime, and substance abuse. Incredibly, there are those who diminish the importance of fatherhood and the nuclear family. We cannot legislate fatherhood, accountability, or character, but we can provide supports for fathers to equip and encourage them to take an active role in the lives of their children. So this bill, House Bill 7065, will include educational programs, mentorship programs, and one-on-one support to encourage responsible and involved fatherhood in Florida. Go ahead, Tyrone.
All right, so
include jobs in that. They need to include jobs and ability to be able to work and so on and so on and so on in that same bill. But go ahead, Tyrone.
but this is a perfect political um, circumstance here, because first of all, we can all agree that there are men who shuck their father responsibilities. We can all agree that something needs to be done about it. Now, where the different opinion is going to be is what's most effective to be done and how to get it done. All right. But in the process of figuring that out, our governor can now gain political clout by saying that he's trying to do something. So when I hear those kind of things, the thing that comes to my mind is how do we take that and actually put it to good use? Because we can't stop it. All right. So it's going to come. But if we, those who are responsible fathers and are a part of the responsible neighborhoods and part of the responsible minority group, if we don't seize those funds and make sure they go to places that truly help, then we're just as culprit as he is. We know that needs to be done. Dr. Kane, you said we're going to offer them jobs. So if we're not in a position or have groups that are in positions to receive those funds and create jobs, then we've missed the boat. We've missed the opportunity. So it's easy for us to point the finger and say, hey, man, this is as political as it can be. There's no serious concern. But at the end of the thing, there's still millions of dollars that we could use. And for every individual you help, he has the potential to help another. And before you know it, we've helped more than they ever had attended. See, the beauty of the minorities has always been we've taken the little that you give us and we've amplified it to areas that you never thought. When you talk about us not about the school and not being able to teach it, well, you know what? The first thing I think of is in my household, in my family, it was taught at home anyway.
Right.
So if you don't teach it at school, it did not matter. Now, of course, we want it to be taught to everyone, and we feel it's important that it be known, but education has always started at home. If you're not having the conversation and discussions with your children and your children's friends, and then you're missing the boat. There was a time that African Americans, one person was trained or taught to read. And after their entire day working, they came home and taught everyone else. But we find it easy to rest on our laurels to a degree, and we stop doing that. Okay? So we have to look at the entire picture with regards to our responsibility, their responsibilities, and how do we continue to do what we've proven to be successful for us, and that is to take what little they give us and multiply it beyond their wildest dreams.
Well, one thing about it, wait a second, Dr. Kane, because I really want you to chime on this. One thing that I learned years ago when I was at the American Public Health Association Summit, and they had a male caucus. What they said, and it's something to think about. There are systems that the government has put in place that don't encourage families. There's the Women, Infant, and Children's Program. There are public housing communities that the ladies are told, if we find out a man is there, we're going to kick you and your kids out, right? Well, why not? So you're already, how's that helping the family? If
It's
you're
not.
not encouraging her to establish a relationship with a man, to have the man, the family, the nuclear family together. So they're just, I hope that this $70 million is what he set aside will also look at those systems that are in place, those the institutional and systemic racism, classism, anti-familyism that are set up that really don't encourage families and relationships for people to even get together.
Well, both of you guys have highlighted the point, and Tyrone, you got more access to some of the chat that has been there, especially with what KJ put in. But the thing that I will say is both of you have highlighted this. We've always, and we should encourage this. Sometimes we know the game, we know what the game is. They set the rules, but where we've been able to beat them at their own game is because we take those same rules and put them in the best interest of our families and our communities. So you literally, you take those rules, you don't have to violate them. You ain't got to go and do something criminal, but they set the rules. So our fathers and forefathers turned right back around, took those same rules and used it to advance their families. And that's what both of you guys have alluded to. Can you just go ahead and Tyrone, at least, because I don't see the chat like you do, but go ahead and talk about, there was two comments, the last two comments that KJ made.
The modern day family, the modern day teenage mother is not equipped to educate her children. That's when the
And
community needs to, that's when the community needs to step in.
yes,
And we know from having had on previous shows, we had Amastar, Annie
yeah,
Roof Foundation,
yeah,
even the Partnership for Child Health, for instance. There are a lot of nonprofits, the Jacksonville Urban League, a lot of nonprofits, sororities, fraternities who have programs and things in place. But we got to make sure that, as you know, those parents who need that, they've got to be encouraged from every angle to get their children involved in these activities. First of all, let them know about it. When you go to the doctor, for the doctor to talk to you, how your children doing? Dr. Cain, you may not see children, but you see parents. How are your children doing? What kind of things are they involved in?
well,
I
how
think
the grandchildren,
if they are, how your parents are doing, are your parents involved in senior activities? Because some of us are in the sandwich generation. I think when people start having the conversation from every angle of where they're going to check on, doing a checkup on the family. How's every member of the family doing, from the children to the seniors? Now I have to pause and say this because we are paused for the truth. We're at 7:29 p.m. And it would be at this point where we would say to our guests, we've had a very lively discussion and we could go on and on and on. And it's been great discussion. So Dr. Cain and Tyrone, since we are pauseforthetruth.com. Are you ready to share your final thoughts of the evening? And we do this open mic type of discussion again, or do you want to keep this conversation going? We're at that point.
one thing is somewhat keep it going, in that I still have that one other comment that KJ put up there. Tyrone, can you put that back? The modern day mother is not equipped to teach. We need the community to pool resources to educate our children. And what was the other one? Eliminate the question on job application. Have you ever been convicted of crime? I can concur with that, that if you serve your time, right or wrong, if you've done the time, you did the time so that you can pay back society for what crime you supposedly did to them. And for you to be punished forever and a day and not be able to vote, not be able to get have access to a decent job, not be able to have access to certain insurance, and so on and so on. That's a crime in itself, in my opinion. So I think that question needs to be addressed. Now, to go back to what you were saying, Ms. Turner, I do think that as a discussion when it relates to um, an open mic, one of the things we had before we got on was that we are going to make it to where anyone that wants to speak to the mic will now be able to verbally say some things, and or they can still be able to type into the chat box and ask questions. We want a diversity, and we want the capability of people to be able to access and speak to the show in a diverse way. And so we will be adding that as a feature for a future show.
By the way, the act that's not to ask that question, I forgot what it's called. It's called Ban the Box. Ban the Box is a campaign to remove questions about past criminal convictions from job applications and push background checks to a later point. Yada yada yada. But anyway, so ban the box.
I think what the format that this has created for me is that we need more of a community discussion, and because that's when you take that time to pause to tell the truth. When people have questions, they also have answers. They all have, and sometimes it's just a concern. That's when we need to make sure the community has an opportunity to speak to those items, and that's why we're here. And we bring a lot of topics for discussion, but we want to make sure that it's beyond telling people what we think, and
It'll spark them to want to do something about it.
Right, and they have excellent ideas, and we need to have a podium by which these people can talk their ideas, speak to their concerns, and speak to the suggestions that they may have. So, the answer to your question is, I like the format, because we can go on and on forever about a whole bunch of stuff that is happening, like we do with many shows. We always run out of time.
With me and you and Mike, and we're going to keep going, right?
Yeah, boy. We can talk about it forever and a day. Okay. However, I realize we only have a limited time, and we appreciate the people that do communicate with us, that do watch the show, because sometimes people just want to listen, but other times people want to chime in. Right. And we want to give them the ability to chime in. The other thing that I'm going to say is that we also have said from day one, we want to listen to our audience. Bring us your subject matters, bring us your topics for discussions. Sometimes we can find experts. Many times we can find experts in those matters. And so we would like to be able, if you bring it to us, we'll go out and get the experts so you can have a discussion, if you want to call it a debate, with those experts. One of the things we need to do is bring the Urban League in, and let's talk about what the advisory committee and that you named earlier, Ms. Turner. We need to bring in, Dr. Danford, and
our city council president, Sam Newby.
Yeah, let's put them to the task. Let's talk about it. We don't have a problem talking about it, and it is what it is. If you believe in what you're saying, speak to it. I speak to a lot of things, whether I'm wrong or right. I at least speak to it, and I do listen, because if you tell me I'm wrong, I can apologize for being wrong and try to set the record straight because of what you said, because what you said may be right and I was wrong. But that's what discussion is all about. That's what the truth is all about. That's why we pause to do that.
So is that your final thought for tonight, Dr. Cain?
Pretty much.
Tyrone, thank you for coming from behind the scene and joining us on the scene. So what are your final thoughts from all the things that we talked about tonight?
Well, I think there are a couple of things that are really important. The name of the podcast is Pause for the Truth. Not pause for my truth or Dr. Kane's truth or Miss Johnson's truth. It's pause for the truth, period.
The truth.
All right. And so that's one of the things that we've attempted to do in all the shows. One of the reasons why I got involved and one of the reasons I'm proud to be involved is because I have two individuals who never claimed to know everything and were more than willing and open to reach out to individuals who were knowledgeable in those fields. So when we put forth a podcast, we give you information from people who know because we were humble enough to understand that we don't know everything. All right, and when Dr. Kane plead that you send us your information and topics and things that you want to talk about, we sincerely hope you do that. Because the first effort when that is done is to reach out to individuals who are professional and are knowledgeable in that field to give you the truth. The truth stands on its own merit and does not need any help from either of us. So in my closing words, I like to say, first of all, thanks for an opportunity to come from behind the scenes and have an opportunity to speak in this here open mic or open forum and have an opportunity to say things that are on my mind. It was truly a pleasure. I think you can see I have as much conviction and passion with regards to these subjects as our co-hosts do. So I just like to say thank you once again.
Yeah, coming from behind the scene and being on the scene. Ms. Turner, now I need to turn the tables, and it's now time for your final thoughts.
So thank you, Dr. Kane, and thank you, Tyrone, for joining us tonight, as I said, for coming from behind the scenes. And don't forget that Tyrone is available at calltyrone.net. And when Dr. Kane and Tyrone mention about sharing your thoughts for future shows, email us at info@pauseforthetruth.com. Again, that's info@pauseforthetruth.com, and share your show ideas. But go a step further. If you know someone who would be a good speaker for that show, make that recommendation as well. Tonight, we brought about a lot of interesting topics. We hope that it sparks some thought in your mind to say, what can I do to enhance my city, the place I've decided to live with my family. If you don't like how things are going in any aspect of our community, you're a taxpayer, do something about it. Know that as individuals, we do have rights. Exercise your right to call your council person, your state legislature, as well as your congressman or senator, those individuals at every level of government that we've elected to represent us. Don't take the attitude that, oh, they're just going to do what they want to do. No, they want your vote the next time it's time for election. So thank you, as always, for tuning in to Pause for the Truth. And join us next week as we continue the discussion about what's really going on so that we can hopefully enlighten you and you share with others. Thank you and have a good evening.
And I will say this will not be the last open mic that we have.
Thank
I
you.
hope so. Okay. Good night, everybody.
Good night.